Yeah. It's easier than you think, bro.
I like the message.
Well, I thought Daniel was coming.
He is. I didn't know he was coming. I would have rode with him.
Man, it's a packed crowd out here.
I'm saying.
What are you playing? The whole university is coming down.
What are you playing?
Huh?
What are you playing?
I don't know, some lo-fi thing.
Some what?
Some lo-fi.
Sounds about right. Yeah. You just playing a pad or what?
No, it's like 2 pianos and then bass and that's it. It's like a 15-second song.
That's all you have to play?
Yeah.
For like 15 seconds.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to go through the whole process. Like, you can be like, hey, this is how I can use the
Oh.
So we're going through the whole recording process.
What? So he's like teaching us how to record?
Yeah, basically.
Bro, I'm out.
It's easier than you think, bro.
This is my whole job. Is he doing an Ableton or Pro Tools?
And Logic, bro.
Logic?
Hi, Professor Salgado. I turned in my project. Hopefully I don't fail.
We good?
We just found out like every 30 minutes ago. Took Facebook with my I checked my mic out. I told you.
On behalf of the ENMU Department of Music, welcome to another outstanding musical performance. Your consideration for fellow patrons and performers by not causing any distraction that will disturb the atmosphere of the concert will ensure everyone's full enjoyment of the live performance. Should a young patron become unruly, please exit to the music building lobby as soon as possible. Please turn off all electronic devices at this time. Photography and videography are prohibited during performances, when the performance has concluded. Thank you.
Podcasters in the room. Podcasters in the room. Welcome, welcome. Well, It's easier than you think. Well, I want to demonstrate to those of you that are here tonight how easy it is to record your own music and distribute it to the world. But in fact, it has not always been that easy. So, let's talk about the history of recording audio and how it's evolved. So recording music has come a long way since its inception in the late 19th century. The earliest form of recording music was done using the phonograph, which was invented by Thomas Edison in 1877. The phonograph used a rotating cylinder covered in a sheet of tinfoil. I just realized I forgot to turn my microphone on. There we go. I don't have to yell as loud. Which was etched with a recording of the sound waves produced by a voice or instrument. This recording could then be played back by a needle that traced the etchings on the foil, producing sound. In the early 20th century, the phonograph was replaced by the gramophone, which used a flat disc made of shellac or vinyl. The gramophone was more efficient and produced a higher quality sound than the phonograph, making it the preferred method of recording and playback for many years. In fact, I have a recording that I'd like to show you of one of the very first early audio recordings ever made. Listener discretion. It is very eerie, and it actually scares me, and it gives me chills every time I listen to it. But this is one of the early recordings, and this is somebody singing A Clair de la Lune. But to them, it was progress. They're like, yes, we finally accomplished recording audio. But obviously, it bettered as it evolved over the years. And then with the invention of the magnetic tape in the 1930s, it revolutionized the recording industry and it allowed for the recording and playback of multiple tracks. This meant that different instruments and voices could be recorded separately, then mixed together to create a final product. So with the gramophone and the phonograph, you would have to have all the musicians together all at once. You would record, and that was it. That was your recording. You couldn't do anything else. With the magnetic tape, you could actually record people separately. So if you had, you said you had a pianist, you can record the pianist separately. If you had a vocalist, you could record them separately. They did not have to be there at the same time. This technology was used extensively in the 1950s and 1960s, particularly in the development of rock and roll music. And then in the 1970s and 80s, the development of digital recording technology changed the game yet again. Instead of recording sound waves into physical media like tape or vinyl, digital recording allowed for the conversion of sound waves into a series of zeros and ones, which could be stored on a computer hard drive. This allowed for even greater control over the recording and mixing process, as well as the ability to manipulate sound in new and innovative ways. Today, recording music has become an entirely digital process with software programs like Pro Tools and Logic Pro, allowing musicians to produce and producers to record, edit, mix tracks from anywhere in the world. And I'm going to show some of the early equipment that used to be used. As you can tell here, this is a recording booth. I'm going to assume this is probably a photo probably taken in the 50s or 60s, 70s, maybe even early 80s. And an example of a giant mixing board. And keep in mind that all of this equipment was highly expensive and took up a lot of space. You would not be able to have that in your house unless you were filthy rich. I would definitely not be able to afford that inside my house. And unfortunately, for lots of artists back in the day, it was very difficult for them they wanted to start, producing their own music and recording their own music. It was difficult because it was expensive. They'd have to go to a recording studio, and not only that, but the people that were the record label that owned the studio, they would have to, like the musicians. They'd have to think that the musicians were going to make money recording these artists, that they were going to produce music that people would want to listen to, and a lot of times it was a risk for owners of studios. They didn't know if these musicians would be able to produce money. And also, with the magnetic tape, it costs money to use that tape. If your musicians were not that good and you had to play the same part over and over and over again, you're costing people money. So therefore, that's why you have musicians getting fired. Get out of here. You're costing me money because you can't play your part. I have to keep wasting tape. And studio time also costs money. Even just being in the studio, time is money. Studios can charge up to thousands of dollars by the hour, some of the top-of-the-line producers. So unfortunately for many artists, they were gate-kept from the industry. And those of you that know the story of Bohemian Rhapsody, there was a dude that did not want to record Bohemian Rhapsody or produce it himself because it was too long for the radio. It's too long. Well, Queen said, you know what, we're just going to go somewhere else that wants to take a chance on us. And then, now Bohemian Rhapsody became one of the greatest songs of all time. So, how has recording evolved from all of this equipment into making it super easy? Well, let's talk about the equipment that we need. One of the first things that we need, probably the most important thing that you need, is a computer of some sort. You might be asking, what sort of computer? There's lots of computers that you can buy. It can vary from, a couple $100 to $1,000 and up. I know in the music industry, a big standard is Apple computers, especially because of the exclusivity of some software programs like Logic Pro X and stuff. Logic Pro X and GarageBand, as you heard, GarageBand is a huge beginner's recording software. Those are exclusive to Apple computers. So when I'm talking about recording softwares, they're called digital audio workstations. I'm going to explain that more in just a second. But a computer is one of the things that you need. And then after a computer, one of the things that you need is a handy-dandy little keyboard to play your sounds on. And we're also going to explain how important the keyboard is later on in the presentation. And an audio interface. Now, what is an audio interface? An audio interface works like a bridge. Obviously, we're working with digital recording software. When you're recording a microphone or a guitar of some sort, you're micing anything up, an amp, you're using any type of microphone, this is still physical audio. So the computer can't read physical audio, so we have to convert it somehow. That's what the audio interface does. It converts physical audio into digital audio, and there's lots of different sizes of interfaces and prices. This is a really small one, super basic interface. Some interfaces have lots of things you can plug into, like if you want to record an entire drum set, you need lots of mics for that, so you need a much bigger interface to do that. Same thing with the MIDI keyboard. There's lots of shapes and sizes and prices within these MIDI keyboards. They can make them from full-size keyboards. They even make them feel like a grand piano with weighted keys. Or you can have as small as that kind of MIDI keyboard. And people like to make jokes about rap music can be made with this small a MIDI keyboard. You probably can. Some songs can be made with this small of a keyboard. All you need is a simple melody, bass line, and a drum beat. And you got a song right there. But all jokes aside, this is an example of a very compact MIDI keyboard. Use 25 keys. That's plenty to play some chords on it. It's got some drum pads to play some drum loops on there. So they all vary from sizes and price. This one right here can cost you about $100, very inexpensive. This right here can cost you about 70 to 80. So roughly with an interface and a keyboard, it's $200, and a computer can cost you about $1,000. So you're looking at about $1,200 as opposed to 10 grand of having a giant mixing board and all this equipment. Now, getting back to the digital audio workstation, there's lots of digital audio workstations. For example, a lot of us use Microsoft Word to write any sort of papers or anything like that, or Microsoft PowerPoint, like I'm using right now to give this presentation. But there are lots of programs that accomplish the same thing. Same thing applies to digital audio workstation, or DAW for short. There are many types of DAWs that accomplish the same thing. The three big ones in the music industry is Logic Pro X, which we're going to be working with today. That is the DAW I'm working with. Pro Tools, which is another industry standard, and Ableton. Those are the three big ones. There are other less expensive recording softwares that can accomplish the same thing. They just don't have as many features as others do, but there's inexpensive ones like Reaper that'll cost you about, I think, well under $100. There's even free ones like Audacity and, like I said, GarageBand. Logic Pro X is essentially GarageBand with all of its features unlocked. So, without further ado, let's get into Logic. And here I have Logic opened up. Now you may be wondering, what the heck am I looking at? Well, we're going to explain all these tools that you have here and what you're looking at. Remember that a recording software is essentially a virtual recording studio. All those pictures, and you saw those examples of giant mixing boards and all that equipment that you saw in there, it's essentially all put into a small package into recording software. So think about it that way. You have a virtual recording studio on your computer. So let's talk about some of the tools that you have in Logic. This first little tab right here is the library. Shows off all the kinds of sounds that you can pick from. They all come with this software. Now you may be talking about, how do I get these sounds, or what are these sounds? So let's talk about what a virtual instrument is. Obviously, let's say, for example, you have a couple of friends, and you guys have a rock band, and you want to add some orchestra elements. You want to add some strings. You want to sound like you have an orchestra behind you. Well, you can't go out there and hire an orchestra. It's going to cost you a lot of money, okay? You can't just go up and pay an orchestra $100 to come play for your song. They're not going to play for your song. But you can actually get orchestra sounds through Logic, because all these sounds are available to you. Now, many of you might have been wondering what MIDI is. I kept saying MIDI keyboard. I'm going to explain what MIDI is in its simplest terms, because it can get very complicated very fast. So, this MIDI keyboard right here is absolutely useless if it's not plugged into a computer. It's got no sounds. All it is just communicating to the computer through MIDI. It's a form of communication. In its simplest form, MIDI is sending messages to the computer. For example, note off, note on commands. Pressing down on the key, took my hand off the key, sending the message to the computer to cut off the note, stop playing the note. So this is sending messages to the recording software no matter what I play. Let's say if I play this note C right here, it's telling the computer, okay, sound the note C on this instrument. So you see I have this piano selected here. So since I'm hitting the C, it's sending the message to the computer to play C, and I have a piano collected, so it's going to sound the piano. So that's MIDI in its simplest form. This right here is the inspector. If you click on these instruments we have already picked out, it kind of shows you a more in-depth look at the channel in the instrument. And we'll explain that more as we get further along. And this right here is your mixer. Think about this as your virtual mixing board, just like that giant mixer that I showed you earlier. It's compact, and it's placed into a software for you, so you don't have to carry that thing along with you. You can do it anywhere you want to do it on. And it shows you all of the instruments here. So you have our two pianos, our bass, and our drum machine. And we'll explain the editor later on in the presentation, but that tool will be there, and we'll feature that. These are your basic play controls. Most of you guys know the square, stop, your most popular stop button, play, record. The little record button is actually a cool feature in Logic called capture recording. A cool feature about Logic is that it's always recording. So let's say that I play some really cool melody, and I'm like, wow, what was that? I wish I was recording. Well, if you hit the capture record, it'll actually bring in what I was playing, in case you like something that you played and you forgot to hit record. And then this little handy-dandy thing right here is what's called the cycle button. So let's say you want to listen to a specific section of your music, but you don't want to be pressing stop, rewinding, pressing stop, rewinding, fast-forwarding, etc. You can turn this on, and it'll loop that specific section, and you can extend it or shorten it as you like. This right here is simply showing where you're at in the music. Those of you that are musicians, classically trained musicians in particularly, you guys know that we have measures. Let's say, for example, we're in 4/4. 4 counts as a measure. That's all what these numbers are showing you. If I zoom in a little more, you see that's measure 1, measure 2, so on and so forth. And That's what this is showing you, just the position where you're at in the song. And then this right here, you see that C chord. If you play chords on the piano, it'll actually, the MIDI messages will show on here, showing you what chords you're playing on here as well. This little 1, 2, 3, 4 thing that you see turned on is the count in. So if I hit record, it won't start recording right away, but it'll count you in. So if I hit R on the keyboard, now it's recording. That's after it gives you 4 counts. And then the thing right next to it is the metronome. As you can tell, it's highlighted purple. If I turn it on all the way, that turns on the metronome for the entire time. But if I leave it with the metronome highlighted inside, that means that the metronome is only going to turn on whenever I hit record. And if I turn it on, it'll play the entire time that it's playing back. And then this right here is showing you your master volume. Make sure that your overall song is not too loud. And we'll talk about levels as we get on into the presentation. And then a cool little feature from Apple is something called Apple Loops. These are all little various tiny recordings of guitars, vocals, piano, you name it. There's lots of instruments, lots of little recordings and little melodies and chord progressions that you can find in here. You don't even have to you don't even have to even record some of these things. They're already done for you. And you can select from various instruments. Let's select electric guitar. Let's see what kind of loops you got from the electric guitar. Let's try another instrument. Let's try some vocals. What do we got? Some vocals. Lots of cool little things you got there. And you can even choose different types of sound effects. Let's see. You can choose, actually, let's look at this. You can choose from different genres. So if you want something that's tech house, you want something that's dubstep related. All little neat things that you can choose from in there. That is available to you. There's lots of endless sounds that you can choose from. And then this little tool right here is just your file directory. You can look through all your files on your computer. So let's say somebody sends you, a recording of themselves singing or whatever. You can, find it on your computer without having to search outside of the program. And you can just drag it into Logic as needed. And then as we get down here, these are all these instruments that we have picked out. You might wonder, well, how the heck did I get these? Well, if you press this plus button here, you can add a new track. Software instrument is the same thing. It's a different term for virtual instrument. It's an instrument within the software. So if I add a new instrument, I can pick from any of these sounds, like what I was talking about earlier. You want a orchestra, well, you can get an orchestra. I happen to have a real orchestra in person. So that's one little cool thing. The next thing is you can add an audio track. Now this is for physical audio. This is where your handy-dandy interface comes in. You want to record a vocal. For the purpose of this presentation, we will not record a vocal just because this venue is not ideal for the kind of vocal that we want. You usually want a place where there's no echo or any type of response. You want it to be super dry and raw. But I'm going to show you how you can record vocals. So cool little thing here. So obviously I added my audio track. When I press this little R button right here, it's called Record Enable in Logic, or some people know it as Arm to Record. That means you're preparing the track to be recorded, and as you can tell, it's ready to be recorded, and you can see that there's signal. There's something coming through every time I speak. Well, let's record some audio. Check 1 2. 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 Check. You get playback. So it's pretty simple to record a microphone via interface. And then the last type of track that I want to show you today. This one really hurts my heart. I'm a drummer. That's my first instrument. I think this feature is an absolute abomination. But it helps people who don't know how to play drums or don't have a drummer. You have not hired a drummer for your song. You can get a cool little drum groove. And if you want to mess around with the drum groove, if you go to the little editor, that's a feature here. The drums, if you want to make it louder, you can drag it up to the louder part of the grid. Let's say you want to make it louder and complicated. You can move that over to the loud and complex section. Let's say you want it soft and loud. Simple and soft. Soft and complex. So you can mess around with all that stuff. Add percussion if you want. Add a little tambourine. I advise you to hire a drummer. Don't use this feature, please. What's a cool little thing you can add? Well, there's nothing else left to show but to start recording. I have a friend of mine / client of mine, Malachi. Will you please come to stage? So I'll give it up for Malachi. Wow, something just changed here. Technology, you gotta love it. Sometimes it likes to have a mind of its own. I'm gonna reopen this. Sometimes this does happen. Technology at its finest. Well, Malachi, you have an idea for a song. Malachi wants to create a lo-fi hip-hop beat. How many of y'all have heard of lo-fi hip-hop? It's actually it comes from jazz, actually. It is comprised of very simple instrumentation. So like basic piano playing jazz chords, basic bass line, basic drum beat, electronic drum beat. So Malachi came to me and says, I have an idea for a lo-fi hip-hop song. I know what to play. I know what kind of sounds I like here. I already picked them out. I just need help on putting it together. So I said, all right, I will be your producer in this instance, and we'll produce this song together. So before we start, as you can tell, when I'm clicking on these tracks, you can see the little R. It might be hard to see, but it's highlighted red right now. But even if I click on it, you can see that the R inside of there is highlighted. That means that it's kind of ready to record. And if you play something, whatever I have selected, it's going to be played. So I'll pick the bass, it's going to sound the bass. If I select the drum machine, you'll hear the drum machine. So whatever I have selected is what's going to play. All right, let's start with your chord progression, Malachi. Let's just get right to it. A nice little cool progression. One cool thing about lo-fi is that it's super simple. It does have jazz chords, but they tend to be very, very simple and very repetitive. And these tracks only tend to be about a minute long. You listen to lo-fi hip-hop, usually songs are only about a minute to a minute and a half long. So we really don't need much. That's just enough of what we need from the piano. So we're actually going to extend this progression. You might wonder, how the heck did I do that? Well, a cool feature about Logic is that if I go up here to the right corner, watch as I click this, I'm highlighting this. That's called a MIDI clip. And you might be wondering, what are all these lines and little dots? That's just the MIDI being visualized. And you can actually visualize it even more in the editor. And let's say Malachi would have made a mistake. Let's say Malachi would have accidentally hit a wrong key. Actually, that doesn't sound, that still sounds good. Let's make it worse. That still does not sound bad. Let's figure out something. We're going to jack this up. That's going to sound bad this time. Malachi kind of hit a wrong note there. Well, we can fix that by simply moving the MIDI line over and dragging it up to raise the pitch or dragging it down to lower the pitch. You can also fix the timing. Let's say Malachi played this first chord off time. It needs to be lined up with the downbeat. Well, you just simply drag it over. And it's fixed. Another cool thing that I can do with this MIDI clip is that I can loop it. If I go to the top right corner, I can drag this out and loop it, and I can loop it for however long I want. It can play forever. I can shorten it up if I want to. So we have a cool little chord progression going on here. What do you want to do next, Malachi?
Let's do the bass.
You want to do the bass? Okay. Let's do it the second time through the progression. How about that? I'll give you a count in. I made a mistake now. I completely selected the wrong channel. I didn't even select the bass. I started the piano. The cool thing about Logic and other recording softwares, this is universal throughout, like, for example, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, the universal Command Z, or on Windows it might be the Windows key and Z, the great undo button. Command Z, I undo that. Now I'm going to select the bass for real now. Let's try that again. And look, that ain't cost any tape or money. You can keep redoing it as long as you need to. All right, I like that bass line. Simple enough. Fits the lo-fi vibe, the atmosphere we're going for. I'm going to reset this. All right. What's the thing you like to do next?
Let's do the drum beat.
You want to do the drum beat? All right. Do you want to have it come in at the same time as the bass?
Sure.
All right. We're going to start at the same spot where the bass comes in. Pretty good drum beat, if I say so myself. All right. What's the next thing you want to record?
Let's do a little solo.
You want to do your little solo? All right. You want it the second time through with the bass and drums?
Yes.
All right. We're gonna start right on it. I'm gonna select the piano solo. Now you might be wondering why doesn't he just play it with the same channel that has the chords? Well, cool thing about recording things separately is that you don't have to work as hard. You don't have to play the chords and then have to play. It's much harder to do when you're trying to record it and make the process a lot easier. We can just record things separately. So we're going to record a little piano solo on top of what we have right now. Here we go. You know what? I like that solo so much that why don't we just loop it one more time? And we're going to loop the bass and drums with it. So as you can tell, I'm selecting all these clips together just like you would select on a normal computer. You can select multiple things at once by clicking, holding down, and dragging. All right, let's do the piano chords and do a little outro. let's listen to what we have all together. That's pretty good. But I think we can make it even better. You could say, oh, well, don't you think it's ready to, put on SoundCloud or something, or YouTube? Not quite. There's a lot of things that we can do to make it better. All these songs that you hear on the radio, they weren't just recorded like that, and they're just going to release it. No, there's a lot of extra work that went into the process of recording. Malachi, thank you so much. We're going to make your creation come to life. So, this is a section that I like to call post-production. So, manipulating sound, as we talked about in digital recording. As you look back and you listen to older recordings, they sound, the sound quality is not as good as what we have now. It's because a lot of the technology wasn't available that we have now. You weren't able to manipulate sound and just enhance things. You weren't able to do that. A lot of the stuff is kind of the way you recorded it, that's what you got. Well, with technology, and it's actually not that hard to do, you can simply enhance your sounds quite a bit. So, one of the first things I want to talk about, I opened up the mixer. As you can tell, I have this cool little window right here called EQ. This is a type of effect. I'm going to click on that. It's going to add an EQ. Now, what the heck is an EQ, or equalizer? Well, the simplest way I can explain this is that you can manipulate frequency. Now, what is frequency? Frequency is the types of sound that you hear, the types of pitches that you hear. As you can tell, this is showing you visually what EQ is here. The more to the left that you are, the lower the pitch. And the more you are to the right of this EQ grid, the higher the pitch. And it's measured in hertz. For those of you who don't know, music is measured, sound is measured in hertz. So like I said, the lower the hertz, lower the pitch, higher the hertz. The higher number of hertz, the higher the pitch. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on our handy-dandy little loop mechanism, the cycle, so I don't have to rewind. I can just listen to this piano part over and over and over again. And we're going to manipulate the sound of this piano. And as you can tell over here, you might wonder what this MS thing is over here. M stands for mute. I can mute the track. So you don't longer hear it. And then if I hit the S, it will solo the track, so that's the only thing that you're going to hear. So we're going to solo the piano track, and we're going to listen to it. I'm going to over-exaggerate some of the things on the EQ so you can kind of hear what I'm talking about. Yeah, you can make it sound really bad really fast. I'm going to go ahead and reset this. So yeah, as you can tell, as I was dragging more to the left, the deeper the sound got, and the more I was on the right, the higher it was getting, and the more tinny and less pleasing it started to sound like. So you have these 8 bands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that you can, 8 different points where you can manipulate frequency. As you can tell here, when I'm raising this up, all these frequencies right here are being risen up at the same time. And you can make this thinner. If you click on that, you can make the range a lot thinner of which frequencies you are manipulating. So you can get very, very precise on what frequencies you want to manipulate. But for this purpose, I'm going to reset this again. The bass sounds a little boomy to me. I need to cut out some of those low frequencies. Well, there's this handy-dandy thing called a low cut. I turned that on just now. And see, it's cutting out the lows. This is what a low cut is doing. And I'm going to show you what a low cut does. I'm going to over-exaggerate a little bit so you can kind of hear what's happening. Sounds incredibly thin. All the low end is completely gone. We don't need that much. It's just an exaggeration. I want to deepen the curve of this low cut a little bit. I'm going to compare it. I rolled out just enough low end to where it's not going to clash with the bass. I want to leave room for the bass. The bass lives in those lower frequencies. And also, it sounds a little bright to me. Well, there's this tool called a high cut on the opposite side of the spectrum. I'm going to show you some exaggeration with that as well. All the high end is now gone. Super muffled. Sounds like this. I want just enough. I like the darkness of that. Sounds a lot better. Fits a lot more of the lo-fi vibe. So I think that sounds pretty good. I like to use the term, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's no longer broken. You no longer need to fix it, at least in that aspect. And I'm going to add another effect. As you can see, audio effects, the channel EQ is now in the audio effects. We're going to add a different audio effect. There's lots of audio effects you can use. I'm not going to get into all these. I'm just going to use the most simplest ones. We're going to add a thing called a compressor. You may be wondering, what in the world is a compressor? This whole presentation could be about compression, so I'm not going to go into those details. I'm just going to explain again in its simplest form of what compression does. Compression essentially compresses dynamic range. So you think about, you see waveforms, kind of when I recorded the microphone, you saw those waveforms. Think about it that way. It's compressing the range of sound. So the softer points become louder, and the louder points become softer to create more of an evenness of sound. So when you play it through your car, you play it through your phone, and it's a quiet section of the song, all of a sudden you don't lose all the volume. You can still hear it fairly well. And when it gets really loud, it doesn't blast your ears. It's all kind of mostly even throughout the sound. So that's what we're doing with the compressor. We're going to make the piano sound even. Now I'm not going to get into what all these knobs do. One cool thing about Logic is that there's a thing called presets. So there's settings that they're already done for you. So this is kind of going back to what it's the title of this presentation. It's easier than you think. You don't have to be tech savvy. You don't have to be incredibly musically knowledgeable or know about recording softwares. You can just choose from all these presets and just start playing with stuff and see what sounds good. Well, they have a setting for piano compressor. So we're going to pick that. We're going to pick piano. Let's kind of quiet it down a little bit from those hits of the piano. Kind of makes it a little more even, a little more soothing, a little more smooth sounding. So that's what a compressor does. And there's various presets. If you want a compressor for a guitar, there's all these options. You want a compressor for a vocal, all these options. Drums, same thing. And then there's different other compressors that are more specific by kind of there's a thing called tools, compressor tools. You can play around with these. There's all these presets. Like I said, you don't have to know how to use a compressor. You can just kind of keep choosing presets and kind of find one that works for you. So we added a compressor to that. I'm not going to add this effect to this piano, but I'm just going to briefly talk about it because it's a very popular effect that we hear in today's music. This thing is a thing called delay. And I'm just going to put on a delay and just kind of show you what it does, and then I'll explain more. You hear a lot of echo. it's like repeating itself, but it's not really an echo. It's not like in here that it's like washed out. It's more of, it's repeating itself. That's the effect that delay gives it on. You can kind of play around with some of these effects. And there's even presets on here that create some cool rhythmic effects. Let's pick a dotted eighth note. See how that sounds. Here you can adjust the output mix. This is in stereo. So instead of it's more widened out, there's a left and a right. And I can make the left side more prominent. And I can make the right side more prominent. That's a cool little effect you can add on there. I'm not going to, for the purpose of this, I'm not going to add it to that piano, but it's just a cool little effect that you have in your toolbox. The last thing I want to add to this piano is a reverb. Now, what is reverb? Think about it as creating a space. In this venue, you kind of have natural reverb. You kind of hear my voice kind of echoing out to y'all. But what reverb does is it creates a space. It'd be very difficult to go record this piano in a cathedral if you wanted that type of effect. We'd have to go find one. We'd have to go set up stuff. We'd have to set up microphones. It's a lot of work. But reverb creates the space for you. I'm going to use a reverb called Space Designer. Same thing with like the compressor and the delay. There's presets made for you. You don't have to know how to turn all these knobs and everything. Let's look at what kind of presets we have. There's all these spaces from large rooms, large halls, plate reverbs, and even other warped effects. Let's show you some of the warped effects. So you can kind of, these are kind of not realistic spaces. These are a lot more manipulation, experimental in the sound. Just try a random one, see what you get. That's a cool effects you can get, but we want more of a realistic setting. We want to act like it's being played in a jazz club or something. So we're going to look through. I saw one of these presets. Oh yes, Dark Piano Hall. Fits the name. Dark Piano Hall. Simple reverb. Let's see how that sounds. Kind of here it has a little tail end, more of a life to it, more of a breath to it. You can kind of adjust how much you want of that. It's a little much. You can use the wet fader to adjust that. It's a little too much. I'm going to take it down a little bit. All right, sounds pretty good. That's enough. Well, let's work on our lo-fi, our other lo-fi piano channel that we have, the little solo. And we're going to fast forward over here to, we're going to move the cycle range to this section here. I want this piano to sound the same like the other one. I don't want to change much of it. I want to sound like it's all one piano. Cool thing I can do is if you click Option on a Mac and you drag these effects over, it'll copy them over for you. So now you get the exact same manipulation of sound that you had on the other instrument. So let's listen to how the piano solo sounds now. So both pianos sound good. Let's hear both pianos at the same time. We're going to fix the timing of that piano slightly. Sounds pretty good to me. Let's move on to the bass. Let's see how the bass is sounding. I feel like the bass could use a little bit more low end. Let's add a little bit more low end to that bass, just slightly. And it sounds a little bright to me. Let's do a little bit of a low cut. Sounds good to me. Let's add a compression to the bass. Let's look at our presets once again. As you can tell, I'm going a little bit faster through the process now. Now that I've kind of explained what everything does, once you figure that out, the process becomes a lot faster. Let's go to guitars. Let's see. Let's do a electric bass. Let's try that. All right. Sounds pretty good to me. I like the little hints of compression, make the sound more even. And that's really all we need to do to the bass. Let's listen to the drums now. What do we hear in the drums? I'm not really liking the drums. I'm not liking how much it sounds too bright for lo-fi. Like it's in the right direction, but I'm not convinced yet. Especially this hi-hat here. Incredibly bright. Let's fix that. As you can tell here, I opened up all of the individual sounds that you get in this drum machine, but we're only using 3 of them. Kick, snare, kick, clap, and hi-hat. I have the hi-hat soloed right now, so we're going to focus on the hi-hat. We're just going to add a simple little low cut, make it a little darker. I like it. Fits more of the vibe, a lot more smooth, a lot more mellow. I want to add a little bit of a reverb, a little bit of space, not much. Let's add a small little space. Just enough to give it some breath. Clap is also way too bright. Let's fix that. Adding a low cut. Fits the vibe a lot more. Let's add same thing. Let's add a reverb. Actually, let's add this reverb from this hi-hat. Drag it over. That's a little much reverb. Let's turn it down. I like that. Sounds good. The kick also could use a little bit of a low cut, a little bright. All right, so we're getting there. It's coming a lot better. Let's listen again to what we have. Let's listen to where all the instruments are in. Let's listen to that section. It's almost there. We need to balance out the instruments. We need to mix it a little better. Some instruments are a little louder than others. Well, open up our handy-dandy mixer. We have all these faders here, so we can turn things up or down as we need. Right now, I can tell the bass is a little loud, so we're going to start by turning that down just a little bit. We're going to loop that section again. All right, starting to sound a lot better. I think the piano chords are a little too loud. I need to let the solo come out a little more, make it a little more prominent. Cool little technique that I like to do is turn it all the way down and bring it in until it sounds just right. Perfect, just enough. I feel like the hi-hat is a little loud. Perfect. Clap a little loud as well. Kick is fine where it's at. All right. I think we really enhanced this little song we got here. So let's listen to the whole thing and see how far we've come. Sounds much better. Let's actually do an A and B comparison of everything that we added. So we're going to turn off all of these effects here. We're going to do it just like we had it earlier with nothing on there. And we're going to loop that section. You hear the brightness coming out again from that from those flats, percussion. So it sounds a lot better, sounds a lot cleaner, a lot more enhanced. We got one more step to do, which I like to call the mastering process. The mastering process can also be very complicated, but I'm going to simplify it down for you. So I've been messing around with Logic for about 10, 11 years by now. Whenever I was in high school, I had that phase where I wanted to be a rap producer. I didn't want to rap, but I wanted to make rap beats, and I did for a long period of time. And I would always make rap beats, and then I'd play it in my car, and I'm like, man, it just doesn't sound the same. It doesn't have that punch. It sounds real quiet. There's just not enough oomph to it. Well, I discovered this thing that you need to master songs. I didn't know how to master it. Well, the cool little thing in Logic is that you don't have to know exactly how to master it. It's kind of already done for you. If you click on the setting here, this is the master channel. The stereo out is the overall mix of the song. If you click on this, there's some presets that you can use here. You go to Legacy, you go to Logic. You go to the Mastering tab. There's all these types of presets that you can use that will kind of master your song for you and give it those last finishing touches that you need. So let's just pick one. Add some volume to it. That's a preset that you can use, but I'm going to use one that I've already created that I like to use for myself. Actually, not that one. This is this other one I have here. This one right here. And I'm going to change some things of this, some of these settings some of my more preferred ones that I like to use. So one thing that we can add is a compressor. Just like I talked about, evenness of sound, compressing louds and softs. You're doing it to the whole mix of the song, so it sounds even once you're done with it. So there's this compressor that I like to use personally myself. And a cool thing is that you can use effects that also cost money. All these effects that are included they're all in Logic. They're not free because you have to buy the software, but they come included. But you can also buy external effects that other manufacturers make. And I like to use this particular compressor because it has a mastering setting. This is by a manufacturer called Waves. I have a cool little mastering preset that you can use here. And then this little EQ, I like this EQ from this setting. This is a different way of doing EQ. This is like a more old school with knobs instead of showing like a digital grid. It's a much more simple way of doing EQ. And then a limiter. Or maximizer, kind of both of those names are used. What does a limiter do? A limiter is super important. It essentially, you want your music to hit 0 decibels. So above 0 decibels is kind of bad. It means the music is really almost distorting. It's peaking. It doesn't sound very good anymore. So essentially what a limiter does is that it brings up the overall volume of the music for it to hit a certain volume and then cap it right there. It's a ceiling is what they call it. So this is what this limiter is doing, but I'm going to use one that it's one of my favorites, also from Waves, that you can purchase. Where is it at? Finding all the, okay, there we go. This is a maximizer. It does the same thing as a limiter. And I like to use this preset called High-Res CD Master. So obviously, you know that CDs are almost obsolete at this point, but they were used for quite a while. So this preset comes from mastering a CD, essentially being ready to be put on a CD. So it brings up the overall volume of the track. And we're going to show you kind of an A and B comparison of with mastering effects and without mastering effects. This is without. turn all these off. I got to turn all the hi-hat effects back on. I was wondering why it sounded so weird. See the difference? A lot quieter. Brings up the overall volume of the track. What do you think, Malachi? You like your creation? I think it's ready to distribute. So how would we do this to distribute? Well, I'm going to briefly show you how to distribute. I'm going to make sure this little feature over here, if you click right over here and you drag this, it'll kind of just tell you where the song is going to end. So the song ends right in this range over here. We're going to have the song end right there. And we're going to export the song. If you go to File here and you go to Bounce, you can bounce the whole project. And you can export it as an MP3 and have it ready for distribution. I'm going to export it to the desktop. Malachi, what do you want to call your song? The Coldest. So now Logic will bounce the song for you. We have it in we'll have it on our desktop shortly. And then you can play it back. There it is, The Coldest. So, it's ready for distribution. You might be wondering, well, how do we distribute? What do we got to do next? Well, let's talk about distribution. With the advent of digital recording technology, it has become easier than ever to record your own music and share it with a global audience. In the past, musicians often had to rely on record labels and under-industry gatekeepers to distribute their music to listeners. However, today's technology has given the ability to bypass those gatekeepers and share our music directly with our fans. One of the most common ways to share music online is through streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music. These platforms allow musicians to upload their songs to a digital library that can be accessed by millions of users around the world. Musicians can also use these services to distribute their music to other platforms like iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play, making it available for purchase or download. Social media has also become a popular tool for musicians to share their music with the world. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter provide a way for musicians to connect with fans and share snippets of their music in a more casual and formal way. Two things about, or the two big streaming platforms, Spotify and Apple Music, the two biggest ones. You have to go through a company, or various companies. If you search on Google to upload your song to Spotify or Apple Music, there's these companies where you upload your song to them, and then they will distribute it for you on Spotify and Apple Music. That process is a little more complicated. They do all the work for you. You just have to upload. And some of them have different pricing options. So, for example, some of them are free, but you can only upload one song a month or one song every so often. So if you want to upload an entire album, it's going to cost you a little more money to use those companies to distribute that music for you in Apple Music or Spotify. But there are other free options like SoundCloud and YouTube. You can upload those for free of charge, and people can listen to your music that way. A lot of people have become famous by uploading music to SoundCloud. For those of you that know Chance the Rapper, I believe he started on SoundCloud, and he just uploaded his music for free. And now SoundCloud, Chance the Rapper, because of SoundCloud, is now one of the biggest artists in the hip hop industry. So, and then TikTok too. TikTok is the biggest social media platform. So many people blow up. You can share a little snippet of your song, and people will automatically know who you are, easily overnight. So it's pretty easy to distribute your music, and even if you want to, let's say, for example, those of you that are podcasters that like to record talk shows, I showed you the simplest way to record your microphone. There's websites, for example, the most famous one is Podcasters for Spotify. If you Google Podcasters for Spotify, it'll guide you through the process of how to upload your podcast. That one is free of charge. You can just upload it to Spotify. add the title of your episode, your little album cover for your show, and people can listen to your show right away. So a couple of last things, some closing notes. I want to show you, this is a pretty simple project here. Not very many instruments were recorded. But I want to show you some larger projects that you can come up with. For those of you that don't know, I'm actually on staff at Legacy Church. I'm one of the music directors there. And I get to do this for a living, which is awesome. Well, right now we're in the process of writing our own original music and our own original songs. This is actually a song that I'm working on. This is a large-scale project, lots of instruments, lots of stuff going on, even some vocals that have already been recorded. As you can tell, Logic is struggling to open this out of everything that's going on. But I just kind of want to show you what's possible with a program like Logic. Play a little snippet for you. Little snippet of something that I'm currently working on. And then there's another song right here that I kind of actually came up with 2 days ago. I was just sitting in my living room and I had an idea just pop into my head. I'm like, I'm going to put some music down. This is also another song that I working with Legacy Worship. A little faster song, a little more up tempo. So it can be from the simplest thing to very complicated things on Logic. So if you're wondering, well, I want to start recording, but I kind of don't know where to start, I can also help you in that aspect. For those of you that are in here that don't know me, obviously my name is Rudy. If you are interested in collaborating in any of your projects, you need somebody to produce your music and help you make your creation come true, my email is on there, rgproductions575@yahoo.com. And then there's my phone number. If you actually want to take my phone number down and text me or whatever, you can do that as well. Instagram is Captain Rootster. I didn't realize that was going to be hard to read up there in this projector. You can come talk to me after this as well if you want. And then my Facebook, you can look me up under my name. If you're an ENMU student, I will work with you on pricing. I know hiring a producer can get pretty expensive. So you can follow my social media and stay updated. I'm working on launching a website to help those that want to create their music. So that's all I have, folks. Thank you so much for coming out. It's easier than you think.